I told you it was a sure bet.
Yeah, my brother, you see the future.
Give him his winnings.
Yes, we don't win big today.
See as the thing enter. My guy, congratulations. See as the thing enter.
We are rich now.
Yes, congratulations, man. Big win today.
And he makes no mistake from the spot.
The substitute steps up. This for the win in the 92nd minute. He strikes it.
And it's a goal for City, making it 3-1.
My money is gone.
How can they play like this?
The dusty roadside junction of Benin City buzzed with constant noise from honking buses, shouting traders, and motorcycles weaving dangerously between traffic. But the loudest place in that entire corner was a small betting shop painted in bright green with bold letters that read Bet Ninja. A place where dreams of sudden wealth were sold every minute and hope was measured in odds and scores. And every afternoon men gathered there, Okada riders still wearing their helmets, bus drivers wiping sweat from their faces, and restless young boys eager to turn small notes into fortunes, all glued to the flickering televisions showing European football matches while voices rose in excitement and frustration, numbers were shouted, predictions argued, and money exchanged hands in quick nervous motions. Yet among all these familiar faces one man always stood out, not because he was respected or lucky but because he had become the subject of endless mockery, a 27-year-old named Osaz Ibanovia, tall and thin with rough sunburned skin and a stubborn pride that refused to bend. His appearance alone made people shake their heads as his shirts were always wrinkled and stained, his trousers sagged loosely below his waist, and his worn slippers dragged lazily across the dusty floor. But what shocked everyone most was his habit of exposing his faded, torn boxer shorts that looked like they had survived years without soap or care. Sometimes he would even stretch deliberately, raising his shirt as if proudly displaying them to the entire shop, triggering bursts of laughter that echoed louder than the commentary on television. One afternoon a bus driver pointed at him and shouted that his boxers were begging for retirement. Another man joked that Osaz was disgracing all young men in the city, and the entire shop erupted in laughter while Osaz simply smiled, unbothered and confident, as if the jokes were applause meant only for him. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his legs, and spoke boldly that they could laugh today but tomorrow they would respect him when he finally hammered big from betting. His voice carried the certainty of a man who believed wealth was only one lucky ticket away, yet everyone present knew the truth behind the bravado. Osaz never won anything meaningful, he borrowed money constantly, owed half the shop, and still placed reckless bets on impossible outcomes. His pockets were always empty but his confidence never faded. He lived with his widowed mother in a small leaking room at the edge of the city. She sold roasted plantain by the roadside and begged him daily to find proper work, but Osaz dismissed her words, insisting that one day a single win would change everything. And so he spent every morning wandering the streets and every afternoon glued to the betting screens, arguing loudly about teams he barely understood, predicting shocking upsets, and writing numbers with shaky hope, while his friends gradually stopped taking him seriously. Some pitied him, others mocked him, but none believed he would change. Yet deep inside Osaz carried a strange pride, a belief that destiny was watching him, that humiliation was temporary and glory would come without warning. So he continued sitting there day after day, laughing with those who laughed at him, dreaming with empty pockets, unaware that the very habit making him a joke in the betting shop was slowly pushing him toward a moment that would either destroy him completely or transform his life forever. The next afternoon arrived with heavy heat hanging over Benin City, and as usual the Bet Ninja shop filled up before the first match even kicked off, men arguing over English Premier League fixtures, scribbling numbers, calculating odds, and chasing hope like it was oxygen. And Osaz walked in late with his usual slow confident stride, his faded slippers scraping the dusty floor while his wrinkled shirt hung loosely over his sagging trousers, the same torn boxer shorts flashing briefly as he sat down, drawing the usual laughter. But today he didn't react immediately. Instead he stared at the television screens with unusual focus, his eyes moving quickly between the match list and the odds board, as if something inside him had shifted. One of the regulars joked that maybe hunger had finally forced wisdom into his head, another laughed and asked if he came to borrow money again, and Osaz smirked, replying that today would be different, that he had seen a vision, a word that made everyone laugh even louder, but he ignored them, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, smoothing it carefully on the counter like it was something valuable, and began writing selections with intense concentration, choosing unlikely outcomes, underdog wins, high goal totals, and risky combinations that made no logical sense. The cashier looked at the ticket and raised an eyebrow, warning him that the odds were too wild, but Osaz insisted, saying he wasn't here for small change. He was here for destiny. The amount he placed was tiny, barely enough to buy a decent meal, yet the potential payout printed on the slip looked enormous, and suddenly even the men mocking him leaned closer to see, some shaking their heads, others predicting failure before the first match started. And as the games kicked off, the shop grew louder, every goal celebrated or cursed, every near miss causing groans, but Osaz remained strangely calm, sitting back, occasionally smiling to himself, while his friends watched with curiosity. And then the first surprise happened. An underdog team he picked scored an early goal, a few men glanced at him, then another unlikely match began to tilt in his favor, whispers started spreading, someone joked that maybe the dirty boxers carried luck, laughter followed. But tension began replacing mockery. By halftime, 3 of his risky selections were already winning. Osaz leaned forward now, his confidence growing, sweat forming on his forehead not from fear but anticipation. He muttered quietly that today the story would change, that they should remember this moment, and as the afternoon stretched into evening, the impossible kept happening, last-minute goals, unexpected red cards, shocking comebacks. Each result aligning with the chaotic predictions on his slip. The shop that once laughed at him now fell silent whenever a match involving his ticket played, all eyes shifting between screens and Osaz's trembling hands. And when the final game reached stoppage time, he stood up unconsciously, his shirt lifting again, but no one laughed this time. They were too tense. The commentator shouted, the ball crossed the box, a striker fired, and the net rippled. The entire shop exploded with noise, some shouting, some clapping, others staring in disbelief. And Osaz froze for a moment, unable to breathe, his ticket now complete, his impossible bet successful. The cashier checked the numbers again, then again, confirming it was real, and suddenly the same men who mocked him surrounded him, slapping his back, calling him a boss, asking how he knew, but Osaz simply stood there smiling slowly, the pride on his face louder than any words, yet beneath that pride something else flickered, fear, because for the first time his dream wasn't just talk. It had become reality, and he realized that one lucky win could either lift him from disgrace or drag him deeper into the illusion that luck alone could build a life. But in that moment he didn't care. He only saw respect replacing laughter, and as he held the small ticket that promised a huge payout, he felt like the entire world had suddenly turned in his favor. Word spread across the roadside junction faster than harmattan wind, and before the sun fully set that evening, almost everyone in the area had heard that Osaz, the same man whose torn boxers once attracted endless jokes, had won a massive bet, the kind that people dreamed about but rarely witnessed. And by the time he returned to the Bet Ninja shop the next morning, the atmosphere had completely changed. The same men who once laughed now shifted their chairs to make space for him, some even greeted him with exaggerated respect, calling him a chairman and big man, while Osaz walked in trying to maintain composure, though inside his chest excitement pounded like a drum. He wore the same old clothes, the same faded slippers, yet suddenly they didn't look as shameful as before because confidence had wrapped around him like a new garment. The cashier handed him the payout in thick bundles of cash, and for a moment silence filled the shop as everyone watched him count slowly, his fingers trembling slightly. The amount looked unreal, more money than he had ever touched in his life, and as he finished counting he smiled broadly, lifting his head to meet the eyes of the crowd that once mocked him. A bus driver quickly offered him a cold drink, another man suggested they celebrate, and Osaz, overwhelmed by sudden admiration, agreed without hesitation, buying drinks and snacks for everyone present. Laughter filled the shop again, but this time it was friendly, approving, almost worshipful, and the transformation fueled something dangerous inside him. He began to speak loudly about destiny, about how he always knew his time would come, about how patience and belief had finally paid off. While some listened sincerely, others exchanged knowing glances, because they had seen such moments before, luck mistaken for skill, fortune confused with wisdom. Yet Osaz felt untouchable. He stepped outside, the sunlight reflecting off the dusty road as he pulled out a portion of the money and waved down a passing Okada, instructing the rider to take him to the market. there he bought new clothes, bright shirts, jeans that actually fit, and a pair of shiny sneakers. The trader smiled widely, sensing his excitement, and Osaz enjoyed the feeling of choosing without worrying about price. He even stopped at a small food stall and ordered more food than he could finish, sharing with strangers just to enjoy their admiration. By afternoon he returned to the betting shop. Transformed, wearing one of his new outfits, the difference striking enough that some people barely recognized him. Cheers erupted. Someone joked that the boxers had finally retired, and Osaz laughed proudly, sitting like a king among loyal subjects. Yet while respect filled the air, temptation crept closer. The screen still displayed upcoming matches, the odds still blinked invitingly, and whispers began suggesting he should place another bet, not a small one this time but a bold stake that could double his winnings. Osaz hesitated briefly, remembering his mother's tired face and her endless warnings, but the voices around him were louder, praising his gift, calling him lucky, encouraging him to ride the wave while it lasted, and slowly the excitement drowned caution. He leaned forward, studying the odds again, telling himself he understood the patterns now, that his win was proof of hidden talent, and as he reached into his pocket pulling out fresh notes, a quiet tension formed in the room, because everyone sensed that this moment would define whether Osaz's story was just beginning or already heading toward a dangerous turn. Yet he smiled confidently, ready to chase another miracle. Confidence can rise like a sudden storm, loud and powerful, but it often hides the quiet wind of danger, and Osaz felt none of that danger as he leaned forward in the Bet Ninja shop, his fingers tapping the counter while he scanned the flashing odds with the seriousness of a seasoned gambler. The respect he received only hours earlier still ringing in his ears, fueling a belief that luck had chosen him for something bigger. And when he finally wrote down his selections this time, the stake was no longer small. He placed a heavy portion of his fresh winnings. The cashier paused, glancing at him with concern, reminding him gently that betting success rarely repeats so easily. But Osaz waved off the warning, smiling confidently and declaring that fortune followed the bold. The slip printed, the amount entered, and suddenly the room shifted again. People gathered close, some excited, others uneasy, because the bet was far larger than before, and as the matches began Osaz's heartbeat quickened. At first things looked promising, an early goal matched his prediction, and cheers erupted, reinforcing his belief. He leaned back, crossing his legs proudly, already imagining doubling his money, but soon the tide began to change. A favorite team he trusted conceded unexpectedly. Murmurs filled the room. Osaz frowned but stayed calm, saying football was unpredictable. Minutes later another match swung against him. The underdog he chose struggled, missing chances. The tension grew heavier, sweat formed on his forehead, his confident smile fading slowly, and as halftime approached the slip that once looked powerful now seemed fragile. He shifted in his chair, trying to maintain composure, yet his foot tapped nervously on the dusty floor. The men around him watched quietly, some remembering how quickly luck could disappear, and when the second half began the collapse came fast. A red card ruined one of his picks, a last-minute equalizer destroyed another. Groans filled the shop. Osaz leaned forward, whispering to himself as if willing the players on the screen to change fate, but football obeyed no one, and when the final whistle blew on the last match the cashier shook his head gently. The ticket had failed, the money gone in a single afternoon. Silence wrapped around Osaz, the same silence that once followed laughter. He stared at the slip, unable to move. The notes he spent hours earlier now felt like a dream. Someone tried to comfort him saying he still had plenty left, but Osaz felt a strange urge rising inside him, not fear but determination to recover immediately. He told himself the loss was temporary, that true winners bounced back, and before doubt could settle he pulled out more cash. Shocking everyone, he began writing another bet, larger than the first. The crowd exchanged worried looks, but Osaz's mind had already crossed into dangerous territory. He was no longer chasing opportunity, he was chasing recovery, and as he handed over the money again the excitement in the room turned into quiet anxiety, because they all sensed the same thing. The respect he had gained was now balancing on a thin edge, and with every risky choice he moved closer to the moment where laughter might return, louder and harsher than before. The air inside the Bet Ninja shop felt heavier than usual, as if even the ceiling fan turning lazily above understood that something important was slipping away, and Osaz, once surrounded by admiration, now sat stiffly with determination burning in his eyes. His earlier loss still fresh in his mind but already being replaced by a dangerous belief that the next bet would fix everything. He scribbled new selections quickly, barely studying the odds this time, his thoughts clouded by urgency rather than logic. The cashier hesitated before printing the ticket, glancing at him one last time, yet Osaz nodded firmly, pushing the money forward, and the second round of matches began. At first nothing dramatic happened, the games moved slowly, but inside Osaz a storm raged. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, whispering predictions under his breath, every near goal making him jerk in anticipation, every missed chance tightening the knot in his chest. The men around him no longer laughed or cheered, they simply watched, sensing that the story was turning. Then a sudden goal appeared on one of the screens, but not for the team Osaz needed. A groan escaped him, he rubbed his forehead, trying to stay calm. Minutes later another match slipped away, his shoulders sank slightly. Yet he refused to accept defeat, he kept staring, hoping for miracle comebacks, but football offered no mercy that day. By the time halftime arrived most of his selections were already in danger. Whispers filled the shop, someone murmured that he should stop after this, another quietly shook his head, remembering how quickly gamblers fall once they start chasing losses. Osaz heard none of it, his mind locked onto the screens, his breathing shallow. And when the second half resumed the collapse became undeniable, a late penalty buried one pick, a red card destroyed another, and when the final whistle blew his second ticket failed completely, the silence this time was heavier, almost painful. Osaz stared at the floor, calculating in his head how much remained, his earlier mountain of cash now shrinking rapidly, yet instead of stepping back he felt a deeper urge to recover, pride pushing him forward. He imagined leaving the shop with nothing and facing the same laughter he once endured. The thought burned his pride, and before reason could intervene he reached into his pocket again, pulling out more notes. The crowd reacted immediately, some telling him to go home, others advising him to keep what he had left, but Osaz shook his head stubbornly, insisting that luck couldn't disappear so quickly, that one final bet would restore everything. His hands trembled slightly as he wrote the next selections, no longer bold but desperate. And when he handed over the money even the cashier sighed softly, printing the slip without comment. The televisions flickered again, another set of matches beginning, and Osaz sat back, exhaustion mixing with hope, unaware that with every decision he was moving further from the respect he gained and closer to the same humiliation he once wore openly. But this time the fall would hurt more, because he had already tasted victory and applause, and losing after touching success always feels heavier than never winning at all. By the time the next set of matches rolled across the television screens, the excitement that once filled the Bet Ninja shop had completely faded into quiet tension, and Osaz sat frozen in his chair, his back slightly bent, his fingers gripping the latest betting slip as if holding it tightly could influence the outcome. The same men who once celebrated him now watched in silence, some shaking their heads gently, others pretending not to care but still glancing at him from the corners of their eyes. And the first half of the matches moved painfully slow, each minute stretching like an hour. Osaz's eyes glued to the screens, his lips dry, his earlier confidence now replaced by silent pleading. He muttered small prayers, promising himself he would stop if this one succeeded, promising he would help his mother, promising he would never return to reckless betting again. But deep inside he was already trapped in the cycle, and when the first unexpected goal went against him his heart dropped sharply. He leaned forward, elbows pressing hard against his knees, trying to calculate possibilities, telling himself there was still time. Yet another match slipped away, then another, and the shop grew quieter with every passing disappointment. Someone switched off a small radio in the corner as if even music felt inappropriate. Osaz's breathing grew heavier, his legs shaking uncontrollably, and when halftime arrived he knew the truth. The ticket was almost impossible to save, but still he refused to give up, staring intensely as the second half began, hoping for miracles that never came. And when the final whistle blew the reality hit like a heavy stone. The last of his recovery bets had failed, the money he held proudly just hours earlier had almost vanished. Leaving only a few crumpled notes in his pocket, he stared blankly at the floor, unable to process how quickly everything had changed. Nobody laughed, nobody mocked him, the silence itself was louder than insults. One older man finally spoke softly, telling him to go home and rest, reminding him that luck comes and goes. But Osaz didn't respond. He slowly stood up, his new sneakers now dusty, his shoulders heavy, and for the first time that day he became aware of his surroundings again, the flickering lights, the dusty floor, the same old chair where he once dreamed of wealth, and the realization cut deep. He had started the day as a respected winner and ended it nearly empty-handed. He reached into his pocket, counted the little money left, and for a brief moment he considered placing one last desperate bet, but his hand stopped midway, trembling, the fear finally overpowering pride. He folded the notes carefully and slipped them back, then turned toward the exit, walking slowly as if each step weighed more than the last. Outside the sun was setting, painting the dusty junction in orange light, and Osaz stood there quietly, hearing distant traffic, feeling the cool evening breeze, understanding that reality had returned without mercy, and as he began the long walk home he wondered how he would face his mother, how he would explain that fortune had knocked on his door only for him to push it away himself. The road home felt longer than ever as Osaz walked slowly through the fading evening light, the dusty streets of Benin City now quieter, the same environment that had once witnessed his proud return now observing his silent retreat, his new sneakers collecting dirt with every step. His shoulders slumped under the weight of regret, and the small amount of money left in his pocket felt heavier than the large bundles he had carried earlier, not because of its value but because it reminded him of what he had lost. He replayed the day repeatedly in his mind, the laughter turning into respect, the respect turning into admiration, and admiration collapsing into quiet disappointment, each memory stinging like a fresh wound. He passed by roadside traders packing their goods, the smell of roasted plantain drifting through the air, and for a moment he remembered his mother standing in similar smoke every day, working tirelessly while he chased dreams on television screens. Guilt tightened his chest. He slowed down further, unsure whether he even deserved to go home, but his feet carried him forward. Children played football in an open field nearby, shouting excitedly, their joy innocent and pure, and Osaz paused, watching them. Realizing how different their game was from the one he had been playing, they chased the ball for fun, he chased outcomes for survival, and somewhere along the way he had lost balance. The sky darkened gradually, streetlights flickered on, and by the time he reached the narrow path leading to his home his heart was pounding. He could already imagine his mother asking questions, noticing his silence, sensing the loss without needing explanation. He entered the small compound quietly, hoping she might already be asleep, but she sat outside on a low wooden stool, counting the day's earnings, her tired eyes lifting immediately when she saw him. She smiled warmly, unaware of the storm inside him, asking if he had eaten, and the kindness in her voice broke something inside him. He struggled to respond, nodding faintly. She noticed his unusual silence and invited him to sit, but he remained standing, his hands in his pockets, unable to meet her eyes. She spoke about her day, about customers, and rising prices, and Osaz listened quietly, realizing how far removed his world of betting had been from her reality. Finally she asked if he had good news, mentioning that neighbors said he won big earlier, and the question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Osaz swallowed hard, the words stuck in his throat. He wanted to lie, to protect his pride, but the exhaustion of the day drained his strength. He shook his head slowly, admitting he lost most of it. His mother's face fell slightly, not in anger but disappointment mixed with concern. She sighed softly, telling him money that comes quickly often leaves quickly, her tone gentle yet firm, and for the first time Osaz truly listened. He sat beside her, staring at the ground, understanding that the respect he chased outside meant little compared to the trust he risked losing at home. The night grew quiet, and in that silence he realized that his biggest loss was not just money but the opportunity to change his life when he had the chance. Morning arrived quietly, and for the first time in a long while Osaz did not rush toward the betting shop. Instead he sat outside the small house beside his mother, watching the early sunlight stretch across the dusty compound, the sounds of the neighborhood slowly coming alive, traders arranging goods, motorcycles revving, children preparing for school, and he felt a strange calm replacing the chaos that had controlled him the previous day. The remaining notes in his pocket reminded him of his fall, but instead of shame he felt clarity. He remembered the respect he received, the pride that followed, and how quickly it vanished, and he finally understood that luck alone was a fragile foundation for any life. His mother handed him a cup of tea and sat beside him, her presence steady and reassuring. She spoke gently about patience, about building slowly, about how real progress comes from consistency rather than sudden fortune, and Osaz listened carefully, absorbing every word. He realized that for years he had been chasing shortcuts, believing one lucky moment would erase his struggles, yet that belief had nearly left him with nothing. After finishing his tea he stood up, his decision forming quietly but firmly. Instead of walking toward Bet Ninja he headed toward the roadside where mechanics repaired motorcycles, a place he often passed without interest. He approached one of the older mechanics and asked if he could help with small tasks. The man looked surprised, but nodded, handing him a rag to clean tools. The work was simple yet meaningful. Grease stained his hands, sweat returned to his face, but this time it felt different, earned rather than wasted. Hours passed, and though the pay was small, the satisfaction felt larger than any risky ticket. Later that afternoon he passed by the betting shop, the familiar noise drifting out, men shouting predictions, laughter rising, and for a moment temptation tugged at him, but he paused, watching from a distance. Remembering the rise and fall of the previous day, he shook his head gently and continued walking, choosing effort over illusion, and slowly the story of Osaz began to change, not through sudden wealth, but through steady determination. The same people who once laughed would soon notice his absence. Then his transformation, and though the road ahead remained long and uncertain, he carried something stronger than luck. He carried a lesson carved deeply into his heart, that respect earned through hard work lasts longer than admiration won by chance. And as the sun set once again over Benin City, Osaz returned home tired but hopeful, his mother smiling proudly. And for the first time he felt that his future no longer depended on flashing odds or lucky predictions, but on the quiet strength of choices he made every day.